Okay, we have some people coming in.
I heard it say that starting the webinar. I don't currently see people.
We have a few attendees. I can see them in the participant list.
Oh, yes, I see it now. Fantastic. Hi, everyone. We're going to get started in a minute. One more people join. I'm here with Dr. Randy Pierce from Future Insight. We'll dive a little bit more into his background in a minute, along with Alicia Smith, the Director of Career Launch. Alicia will be monitoring the Q&A as well as doing some of the controls as we get started. Hopefully people got some coffee. We do have some incredible videos of Randy doing some of the stuff that he's done. So I'm excited to share those as well during the presentation. We're gonna do 2 Q&As, one after each video that we're gonna show. So feel free to pop in any questions in the Q&A, and Alicia will share them with Randy and myself.
Mhm. Okay, how do you feel about getting started, Brian? And then others folks will sign on.
That sounds fantastic. Take it away, Alicia.
Okay. Welcome, everybody, to our quarterly webinar, our Distinguished Speaker Series. My name is Alicia Smith, and I, as Brian said, am the Director of Career Launch at Perkins School for the Blind. And we're thrilled to have you here, joining in our community conversation with Randy Pierce. And just a little bit about what we do at Career Launch and at Perkins. Career Launch provides job skill training and career service support to young adults who are blind and visually impaired to really help them enter the world of work and to succeed at work. So as Brian said, we will be using in today's webinar the Q&A feature of the webinar to take questions. So we welcome anybody, any of our attendees, to pop a question in the Q&A right when it comes to mind if you want. You don't have to wait till we ask for questions, and we'll be able to jump in and answer those as the webinar goes on. So let's see, we are so thrilled to welcome Randy as the President and CEO of Future Insight. He's also, an entrepreneur, an adventurer, and a philanthropist. In this speaker series, we love to showcase people who have visual disabilities, who have led really exemplary lives in work and in their personal lives. These folks are just extraordinary role models for trainees in our Career Launch program, Perkins students, and really for us all. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Brian Switzer. He will be in conversation with Randy today. Brian is the training and program specialist for Career Launch. Brian, over to you.
Thanks, Alicia. I'm really excited to have Randy Pierce here today. If you do not know Randy, hopefully you already know him, but if you don't, it's losing its sight. He had continually forged ahead to experience a lot of different adventures and has achieved a tremendous amount since losing his sight. He'd won 2 national marathon championships. He'd been to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro, and he competed in 3 Tough Mudder events. In 2018, he published his first ever book called See You at the Summit. If you if you know Randy, you'll notice a common theme, reaching peak potential, see you at the summit. A lot of what he had done is through his hiking and reaching the summit of 48 peaks in New Hampshire, as well as Mount Kilimanjaro, and as well as being an avid speaker. So we're very excited to have him. To kind of intro, we're gonna first play a video clip highlighting Randy at one of his Top Mudder events, so you can kind of get a general sense of how one of his many accomplishments.
Appears, Heroes of Summer by Oberto, as peach-colored pre-dawn light illuminates mountains in shades of purple. Cars pull into a parking lot and athletes move towards an entrance. A Tough Mudder flag blows in the breeze.
I am Randy Pierce, and for about 20 years now, I've been totally blind, and that's gonna make this Tough Mudder a little more challenging.
The team prepares and we see guide dog Autumn, who has earned the day off.
You know, the truth is, going blind was really hard. I thought everything fun and everything important in my life was no longer possible. And it's just ludicrous to me because now I, climb mountains and run marathons and do Tough Mudders. And our message here really for us is we're out living the life that we believe, right? That there aren't obstacles, there are opportunities.
Hundreds of athletes bounce with excitement at the start. Randy and team are in the middle of the crowd wearing bright yellow t-shirts with the slogan, "I see no obstacles."
Tough Mudder, 10.5 miles of just awfulness.
Everyone scrambles up a steep and dusty California hill, encouraging each other under a clear blue sky. The team crawls through mud under barbed wire, and Randy describes his approach afterwards.
I reached up, felt gently, found where the bar was, put my hand not on it so I knew my head wouldn't hit it.
Gotcha.
Randy jumps from an obstacle into deep water.
My life isn't about my blindness, it's about the choice I made and how to respond.
Dangling by one arm, Randy reaches for a handhold and misses, plummeting into water.
I don't feel bad, I gave everything I could. That's my goal every time, right? The more I invest in life and be in those moments, the more rewards I keep getting.
Randy tries to run up a steep quarter pipe and slides back down. On a second attempt, he pulls Jose down with him. With help from Lauren and Sky on the ground and Greg on top, Randy conquers the obstacle and high-fives people at the summit. The team climbs up tall stairs, and at the top, Randy reaches his cane out to feel a small trapeze bar at the edge of his reach as Jose steadies him from behind.
Learning to look at the world differently is the key to really having vision, and vision is always going to be way more important than sight.
Randy shrugs away his hesitations and leaps out for the trapeze.
Look at this video that's gone viral of Randy Pierce participating in a Tough Mudder challenge, despite being blind. Randy jumped in a trapeze, swung out, and rang a bell only 10% of contestants managed to touch.
Randy pumps his fist from the water.
Every day in my life, I wish I could see. But I would choose to be blind to learn all the lessons I've learned, to come to this point in my life and have so many great people around me that I wouldn't change it. And blindness, if that's what it took for me to get here and have such a wonderful life, then I welcome it.
Randy is enthusiastically greeted by his guide dog Autumn at the finish, and they play on the muddy ground as the team looks on. He stands and triumphantly thrusts his arms in the air. Oberto beef jerky, you get out what you put in. To meet all our heroes, visit.
Awesome. Thank you, Alicia. That was such an amazing video. And I do have a follow-up question. Actually, Randy, I believe you said you had some comments, so I'll let you kind of talk a little bit more about the Tough Mudder event and some
Sure,
of the live button.
Thank you, Brian. There's a couple of fun things I love to point out right up front. The shirts they gave us, I see no obstacles. Well, of course I don't see the obstacles, but I think for anyone, it's really about how you look at an obstacle, how you look at a challenge, right? When you look at something and say, I can't, I won't, I quit, I'll just fail, those can be self-fulfilling predictions. If you look at an obstacle and say, what do I need here? How can I, if it's my personal challenge, how can I learn? How can I grow? Or if it's an external challenge, how can I teach? How can I change so that I can manage this? I think it's an important part of it. I will say there's a shot where they put that shirt on my guide dog. and I really hope my guide dog gets to see the obstacles, or I really am in a lot of trouble. But you know, the last piece I love to share about it, right? There's a little bit about perseverance in there, whether it was climbing up the half pipe and failing and sliding down. You know, failure can often be a part of the process. In fact, they say most CEOs, 63% of the time, have a failure involved before the success. And the difference is, if you quit at the failure, you don't get to the success. So that doesn't mean you don't work to try to get everything to be a success. But obviously, the most important thing is to understand that failure is temporary as long as you choose perseverance and resiliency. So let me throw it back over to where you want to go, Brian, and thank you for that moment.
Yeah, no, I think that some great lessons as a teacher. You know, they say that one of the best way to learn something is to try and try and try, regardless of whether or not you succeed or fail. Oftentimes, even should more at bat, you'll end up learning more, even if you are failing along the way. So I love that message. Hopefully, we'll talk about some other life lessons. What would you say the most greatest lesson you've learned from doing the Tough Mudders, and how it applied to your professional life?
So there's two things I think that stand out strong. The first is, right, in order to have the most success in our world, I think the better we build our teams, the better we prepare ourselves for that. I think team, and there's lots of different words for team, right? They're partnerships, they're collaborative, but the issue is they're an acronym, TEAM. Together, everyone achieves more. And that's true in every situation. And sometimes I hear from people, well, sometimes I'm just better off if I do it alone. And I want to address that for a moment with something you just said, right? The more you try, the better you get. There's an expression that says practice makes perfect. And I don't think that's true, because I don't know what perfect looks like. I don't know how to measure perfect. What I do know is practice makes progress. The more we do things, the better we get at them. And that includes the more we work at being a teammate, the better we get at that. And that's why, right? Teams give you different perspectives to look at how to solve a problem. Teams give you different strengths where other people may have weaknesses. And learning to balance those, learning to manage those is a really big key to success. And the last thing is exactly what I said, was about obstacles, right? Is we're all going to encounter obstacles. I don't know anybody who doesn't along the way. And the real message is, what are you going to do with it? Right? Are you going to take that first option of quitting, or the second option of learning and growing? And I can tell you, the good news is you can always change your mind and switch to the learn and grow. And you're the one who gets those rewards.
Yeah, I absolutely love that message. I know from my own personal life, there's been a lot of obstacles, and you know, I welcome challenges, and I'm sure you do as well. You will actively seek out challenges, not just you know, overcome them as they come, but you seek them out, and you know that you're going to learn and grow as you go along. You're the CEO of an organization and the president of Future Insight in New Hampshire. They are a nonprofit that serves the blind and visually impaired community in a number of ways. And part of your staff include members of the blind and visually impaired community. And statistically, I'm sure you have members of other disability populations on your team as well. You know, from a business perspective, what is the best case for hiring people with disabilities?
Yeah, you know, it's amazing to me. I'm astonished that in this climate where there's such a staffing shortage, that there's still marginalized populations not getting the proper attention for possibility. But the thing that I think is important is that I don't think you hire people because they're marginalized, because they have a disability. I think you hire them because each person brings a different set of perspectives. It's that team mindset. And the things you need to do to adjust to understand every different person's abilities that they bring in, that helps everyone be a stronger employee. There's so many perspectives that if you go without, you fail. You know, my simplest example, right, in that Tough Mudder, right, when I'm jumping out to grab the trapeze, 90% of people fail at that point. And it was one of my teammates who said, hey, why don't we try a different method? Because we see where everybody's failing. Well, that happens in our community of people who are blind and visually impaired, we're going to look at problems differently. We're going to bring different strengths to it that people will lose out if they don't include that. And probably the strongest thing I'll say is that, you mentioned you've gone through a lot of challenges, and I say everyone is likely to face challenge, but because of blindness and visually impaired, we're gonna likely face more challenges trying to integrate with a world that isn't always thinking of that fact. And as a result of that, we get good at solving problems. And that's something very valuable in the workplace. We get good at managing adversity. We get good at communicating to help offset that. And presuming our accountability, mind you, but presuming we do get good, that we do push through those things, it positions us to be an excellent employee.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I think one of the first times I watched your Tough Mudder video, I was really impressed by your out-of-box thinking around that trapeze. I think I would have just tried and failed and see how I did. So I admire your quick wit in problem solving and figuring out a way to accomplish what you need to in order to finish the race. It's really impressive. We're talking a lot about hiring people who are blind and visually impaired, as well as other disability communities, their retention of people with disability. But one of the things we like to promote in Career Launch is advancement mindset, not just landing that job, but growing and thinking further down the road. In your case, you've been quite successful at climbing the management ladder. What advice would you share with others who are hoping to do the same?
Yeah, great question, Brian. Thank you. First, I tend to ease back away from the notion of giving advice, and I'll share my opinion, because the role of each of us is to evaluate what we hear and think about how does it best apply to us. And so I won't have the pretension to believe that I understand everyone's situation well enough to tell them that. I can share some common themes that I think are worth considering in that road. And the first that I would say is people are the key in management, right? We're generally having to better interact with people, and the key to people is you have to know how they think and feel as best possible so that you can then use the rest of your skills to help guide them to success together. It's a collaborative process. I think there are 5 C words that I think are important, right? We have to commit, right? We have a role, we have to be engaged full on, right? It's not just showing up, it's what you do when you show up. It's full engagement. So after commit, we have to connect. That's the part where people come in, right? Finding ways, learning what skills help you understand people, help you communicate with them so they can understand you. And there's my 3rd C word, right? We got to communicate, because in communication, there's so many pitfalls, right? The things you don't want are silence or violence. Communication, you have to have realistic discussion in whatever format. And that's learning to meet them where they are and to understand them. I have some of my team that if I don't speak to them in a Teams chat, it's going to have less effect. Some need an email, and some we have to sit down and talk. And if I want them to get that message, I better understand what they need for success. So the 4th one I want to get to is collaborate, which is right, learning how to work together, inspire people to want to do their best work is part of that collaboration, and give them just enough of what they need and do the same thing. Let people inspire you and get that. And then the final C word that I think is really important is that's where you create something really powerful when you do all those things. And I share a lot of words that begin with the letter C, and that's kind of ironic for a guy who doesn't see, but the truth is that's where it starts. It starts with people, and it starts, I think you heard the message, a little bit of accountability. So the last thing I'll say on that, because there's really so much advice you could give well beyond this seminar. But I think when we are interacting, most of us experience the emotional reaction, and emotions can be great, right? Emotions are joy and passion, which can help drive us and encourage and motivate us. But emotions can also be frustration or anger, things that can get in the way of what we want to do, but we still all experience them. And the trick is, how do we take an action that is not based on an emotional reaction, but rather on a thoughtful response? And I think you can convert those, right? And an emotional reaction starts right away. And there's so much power in a pause, We're so go, go, go oriented that we need to learn how to pause long enough to evaluate, to process all the things going on, to move forward strategically. You know, if we take a quick step in the wrong direction, we've now put ourselves 2 steps out of where we want to be. And that's true mentally as well as physically. So what I suggest is an ABC response, right? Whenever you're having an emotional reaction, what you need to do, and it's true of life, is A, awareness. The awareness of what's happening around you, the awareness of what's happening within you helps you start knowing when to take a different action. So awareness of, is it emotional? Am I reacting to somebody? And if true, then B, breathe. And I say breathe, it sounds simplistic, but physiologically, breathing calms us down. Secondly, it takes time. And that time is using that pause button automatically so that you can consider, what do you want as an outcome from this? And what are the best steps to get there? And there's so many easy examples I can give, but I want to give a guide dog anecdote because I think it's powerful. I use guide dogs to do my hiking, and we'll see some of that. But I was walking along in the winter with my guide dog, and as we're going along, they stop when there's an obstacle they can't avoid. So my dog stops, and it's my job, as you know, Brian, to find the obstacle and tap it so they know we understand it. And in this case, I looked with my foot, nothing. I probed with my hand, and sure enough, there was a branch I would have walked into. So I tapped the branch. Everything's good. This is exactly how I want things to work. So we continue on a little ways, and my guide dog stops again. And this time I can't find anything. And I'm a little frustrated because, right, he should stop me for an obstacle, but I want to trust that he's got a reason. So I say hop up, which is the guide dog command of, go if you can. And he inches forward. And still nothing. And I repeat this 4 or 5 times, and every time I'm getting more frustrated. Well, frustration leads to failure. What I had to do was I had to convert to curiosity. I had to deal with that emotion, right? Awareness that I was getting emotional, breathe to calm down and consider. And what I learned by doing that is there was actually a branch about 8 feet ahead of me, and my guide dog had changed his behavior because when I tapped the branch in the winter, the snow fell off the branch onto his head, and he didn't like that very much. So he wasn't going to let me do that to him again. And we had to learn to change our behavior. And boy, you can take that model to interactions with people all the time.
I absolutely love your 5 C's and your ABCs. As a guide dog owner myself, I can totally relate. If people are not aware, Randy and I have guide dog from the same training school, Guiding Eyed for the Blind, and we have guide dog that are very similar looking. They're very unique, black and tan Labrador retrievers, and so our guide dog get confused a lot. It's pretty funny. Competing in some of the same races as Randy, and people come up to my partner and go, "Hey, why do you have Randy dog?" And it's like, no, they're actually very different dogs. And I absolutely love your story. I know I've experienced the same thing before. The guide dogs are incredibly intelligent, and they're not moving forward for a single reason. I've learned that, similar to you, to consider what is that they're actually looking at, what is the problem. They're obviously seeing something that you and I are not perceiving. I did want to go back to some of your 5 C's. I really like communication and collaboration. I know as someone who progressively went blind over time, as a younger person, I would say more quiet and a student of math. And since going blind, you really have to perfect those communication skills. You have to learn how to disclose your disability, talk about your disability with people in the workplace, people who are typically sighted. Sometimes it's pointing to them why a particular challenge is happening, or even how you're doing something. People in the workplace who are typically sighted often have never met someone who's blind and visually impaired. So sometimes they're just, amazed by something that we do that we take for granted, but you and I do it every day. So having the good communication skills is invaluable. In collaboration, I totally agree, within the workplace as well as networking. A lot of our people in Career Launch who are looking to work really need to build a professional network, collaborate with people. I know you're part of my network, which is how you and I got connected. And so really building the connections is really important.
I'd love to give an example that I think is real important in that communication world that speaks to our accountability in a situation. I got on a bus in Nashua, New Hampshire using my cane before a guide dog. And as I pass by the driver, I want to check that first seat. And I'm not going to just poke them with my stick to see if they're there, right? I'm not going to use my blind cane for that. I'm not going to reach out and tap. I'm going to communicate. And I remember saying, excuse me, is anyone sitting there? And nobody answered. And so I put my 6'4", 200-pound body down onto this woman's lap. And, I don't think that was her intent. So I got up, and again, I was a little frustrated, to be honest, right? But I know how to deal with that, ABC. And I said, excuse me, I didn't realize you were sitting there. Did you hear me ask? And she was vulnerable. What she said was, I heard you ask, but I'd never spoken to a blind person, and I didn't know how. And, again, frustrated, my inner voice said to myself, well, the way you talk to a blind person is by talking, of course, but that wasn't going to be helpful, right? That's why I needed the ABC consider. What do I want to have? And what I realized is in that situation, regardless of anything we talk about afterwards, I'm probably going to encounter a lot of people with a similar lack of education. So if I expect the whole world to change, I'm probably going to be disappointed. What I can change is myself and my approach. So now in that same situation, I say, excuse me, I'm totally blind, so I'll need you to answer me out loud. Is anyone sitting there? Now, if they don't say anything, I know they want me to sit on their lap, right? So.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that communication piece is really important. And it's surprising how little it happens sometimes just because people are anxious. They let that fear of blindness get ahead of them. I know one of the things that Michael Hess, who's a great speaker, had often pointed to, that people subconsciously project their own fears of blindness onto you, and so that can create a difficulty in communication. You and I live these lives, so we're like, yeah, should talk to it like we're people. It's just that simple. But breaking through that ice can be difficult for a lot of people. One of the things I want to talk to you about was allyship in the workplace. Obviously, it sounds like you made an ally on that bus that particular day. But in the workplace setting, how can people who are colleagues of someone who's blind or visually impaired serve as an ally for them?
Yeah. I think building allies is part of that, right? People first, learning how to connect and communicate. Sometimes you need to teach them some of those things. I think I learned two things about working with people. First, I learned how to work with people when I was fully sighted. And then during that same time, I started to learn that, hey, as people, we have so much more in common than different. And that's our basis. Our commonalities are where we can build the trust and the communication. But we're all different. That's why we're individuals. And we all have different needs. And learning how to help others understand your needs, learning how to help others work with you is an important part of that process, whether you're sight impaired or not. But as a sight impaired person, it's going to be more typical that they're going to have less experience. So helping them understand, a couple of ground rules, it's a fair assessment. You and I talked about the icebreakers, and, I always joke, nobody ever asked to pet my cane, but boy, is my guide dog a good icebreaker. But only so much as to start communication. We need language that says, hey, here's what I really need. And if somebody gives you something different because they're trying to help, the first step is to be grateful. I love your intent to help me. And I wonder if I can share with you what is more helpful, because that sets that stage. And, to me, what's most helpful is if somebody wants to help, to say, hey, may I help you? Don't make the assumption of what will work, but communicate, beg the question, and start that process. But the second part, I want to demo that example, right? That I want to offer them too. Hey, is there something I can do to help you? And let them guide me on that front, because I think leading by example is one of the most powerful ways to help showcase proper behavior.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that really goes back to your C of communication. Just having those dialogues is really important.
Yeah.
I do want to go to one last question, and then we'll see if we have any questions from the audience. Is there any, looking back on your illustrious career, do you have any advice for someone who's starting out in their career as someone who's blind or visually impaired?
Sure, right. So same word a bit about advice, right? I'll share some opinions. And I think that we need to apply ourselves. We need to have accountability that we have the right skill sets, which includes not just developing the skills, but developing the way to showcase those skills so that people know that we have them and can build that confidence and trust. And there's a lot of ways to go about that, but I think a lot of people learn skills, develop it, they have their goals in mind, but they fall short in finding a way to present it to people in a confident way so that people really truly believe it. And I know that, the numbers that we have for employment are sadly ridiculously low in our population. And yet every time I'm talking to somebody who's a prospective employer, I'm amazed at how much they just presume isn't possible. So the more we showcase those skills in everything we do, and that goes from everything from what's your posture when you eat? Are you putting your head down to your plate and burying yourself? People are making judgments all the time. And while perception shouldn't matter, perception is a factor. And we better be aware of what all the things we do have as a restriction or a promotion for us getting there. And so learn how to meet people in their realm. That doesn't mean don't be who you are, but learn how to develop the skills that show both the competence and the confidence, right? So I think that's equally important because confidence is what people will most often believe in before the competency. And you said something a little while ago about I embrace challenge. I bring goals to myself, and I think that's true. I call it my GPA concept, right? Which is that a goal is really positive adversity. Adversity makes us tough because we had to either quit or grow, and I'm going to choose grow. And positive adversity is just the goal that brings something positive into your life, but you still have to learn how to deal with it. And my final example of that before I finish off that GPA is when I went blind, most of the people that I know thought it was the worst thing that ever happened to me. And probably I did too at the time. But I look at it now, I think it's one of the best things that happened to me because I learned so many skills. As a result of that, I became a stronger, confident, competent person. And I don't want to lose that. And I realize any adversity does this. So GPA, what is that about? I believe we should set goals. And the first reason is because the more goals we set, the more things we want in our life are likely to become part of our life, right? The second reason is because of that practice makes progress. The more we practice overcoming things, even if it's positive adversity, the better skills and tools we develop so that we can handle all types of adversity, positive or negative. And the third thing is, and I relayed to it earlier, you get confident in your skills by doing that. So what is GPA? Well, goal is the goal. P is the plan, but a plan isn't never enough, right? If you have a goal and you don't have a plan, you don't know how to get there, and it's just luck. But even if you have a plan, that's not enough because you need action, right? So I'm all about your grade point average. That has some importance, but I'm even more about how do you learn to set goals, make plans, and take action.
Yeah, I really like that message. I know goal setting has been really important in my personal life and professional growth, and I'm sure it has been in yours as well. Setting small goals every day in the hope of achieving a long-term goal, really breaking that down, creating a plan and acting on that plan, having that discipline to, carry out on that plan every single day is really important. I know, winning 2 national marathon championships, you can't do that in a day. I'm sure that required a lot of goal setting and planning and taking action every single day to accomplish that goal. Before we watch the next video, I did want see if there's any question so far.
Thanks, Brian. I just would like to remind our attendees you would want to use the Q&A feature, question and answer, to ask questions. The chat is not enabled for this webinar. So if you got a question for Randy and or Brian and or just in general, pop it in the Q&A. We'll get to it there. So there are no questions quite yet.
That sounds great. Yeah, we'll do another Q&A session after the video. So we'll give Alicia a minute to queue up the net video around the 48 feet. Another amazing feat that I'm interested in and looking forward to talking to Randy some more about.
Okay.
December 22nd, 2011, Randy Pierce and his service dog Quinn began their quest to hike all 48 of New Hampshire's 4,000 footers in a single winter season.
A series of images of Randy hiking with his guide dog Quinn. Text, one blind man's journey. Randy sitting at home.
I'm Randy Pierce. I'm a totally blind hiker.
Randy, his guide dog Quinn, and his human guide hiking above tree line in snow and wind. Text, 48 peaks.
If I told you the numbers of people in New Hampshire that are blind, you'd be stunned.
Text, 3 months. Randy's chest camera view showing Quinn navigating ice and rock.
It's an invisible malady because when people go blind, all too often, they hide.
Text, 300 miles. Randy and Quinn appear out of the snow-covered treetops.
I had confidence that I would give my all, but I had no confidence that that was enough.
Randy, Quinn, and his human guide hiking above tree line on a huge snow field. Text, 88,000 feet of elevation. Randy's human guide directs him around a large snowy boulder. Randy's feet in traction gear disappear into the trees as he ascends. Randy's chest camera shows a narrow trail between rocky slabs. Camera view suddenly topples, rolls, and fades to black. Title, 4 More Feet. Randy Pierce's quest to hike New Hampshire's 48 4,000-foot mountains in a single winter season.
Wow, that's incredible. I know you had some comments, so really over to you, Randy.
Thanks again. You know, there's a scene at the end there where a person goes falling down the side of a pretty steep section, and you know, it speaks to a couple of things, right? I say that I am not a risk taker. I'm a problem solver. And that the difference is, right, that a problem solver can do everything a risk taker does with more success and fewer setbacks. And, you know, it's very exciting to have a couple of movies or video clips about my life's adventures. It's not exciting to fall off the side of a mountain, but, you know, there's a couple of pieces of great news. First, nobody was really hurt. And second, it wasn't me that fell. That was my sighted person with me who fell. And so I like to dig in with why they fell, right? I just don't want to pick on them. So here's the thing, and it speaks to that communication. There's a quote by John Wooden, who took it from Ben Franklin, but I love the quote. It says, "We don't plan to fail, we fail to plan." And so I want to have a plan for managing all those things. And in that particular instance, as we came to that steep, more icy section than normal, I suggested, let's put on our micro spikes. It's something you stretch over the bottom of your boot that gives you better traction into the ground. And Justin said, I don't think we need them. Well, he believes me now, but more importantly, part of our plan is we all took wilderness first aid, myself included. And I went down to him and said, hey, let's take care of you. Are you okay? Did all the right things. And he was okay, but he was hurt a little bit. And I asked him, I said, why didn't you put on the micro spikes? What was the reason to not put them on? And he said, well, candidly, it was so cold, I thought that stopping was a bigger risk. And now that's a great answer. But if you remember when I said communication, what we don't want is silence and violence. He didn't tell me the real reason. And if we're going to be good collaborative partners, we need to be honest and earnest in our communication. If he told me that, we could have problem solved together. We could have said, what's the bigger risk, falling or being cold? And what can we do to solve each of them? Maybe a little calisthenics while putting on the micro spikes, whatever it takes. There were solutions, but we didn't get to have that discussion because he didn't speak, right? But the second part is I said, so wait a second, but we did stop because I put mine on. What did you do while I stopped? And he said, honestly, I crossed my arms and I glared at you. And, you know, candidly, glaring at a blind person is not going to accomplish a lot. But why did he do that? He did it because he closed his mind. And that's something that's easy for any of us. I'm guilty of it plenty of times, right? He said, I have a good reason why I don't want to. He said this in his mind, so I don't even need to consider it. And then when his good reason, not stopping, went away, he didn't reevaluate. If we want to make the best decisions, we have to keep our mind open to learn new things and evaluate them. It still gives us the freedom to make the choice we think is right, but it makes sure we're paying attention to everything that's applicable. And the last thing I love to share about that video is that, you know, the name of it, 4 More Feet. Why does it have that name? Well, I hike with a guide dog. So one of the reasons is the 4 feet of my guide dog. But there's another reason. We were on the hardest part of our climb was doing the presidential range. And that means you're above tree line for 8 miles exposed to all the weather. And it'd been a tough day. It was 20 feet deep of snow in one of the areas. And when we're coming up on Mount Washington, where it was a little warmer, but we know the temperature, it was minus 27 degrees with the wind chill. The wind were 50 miles an hour. Now we had all the right gear, but I was still a little bit tired, obviously. I had more to give. And as we're approaching the summit, I stopped. I didn't know how close we were. I just knew I was tired. And I shouted out to Justin, what I didn't know is they were filming at the time. I said, how much further? Because I wanted data. I wanted to understand. And he said 4 more feet. I had stopped 4 feet away from my goal. And he shouted that over the wind, right? They were filming because they thought they were going to get this epic shot of blind man and guide dog reaching the summit on their own. What they got was blind man whining about being tired. But that's okay, right? I was tired. But here's the part that I think is important and why I share that story. When he told me 4 more feet, and I was like, really? 4 feet? He's like, yes. I suddenly was energized. And where did that energy come from, right? I didn't drink a Gatorade. I didn't eat a power bar, right? But suddenly I had energy. And by the way, I'm not sponsored by them, but any of you have connections, you let me know. But here's what happened. It's my mindset, right? Whether it's a physical goal, whether it's a mental goal, when we focus on how close we are getting to our goal, it's easy to get a little bit energized. If we're focused on how much baggage we're carrying, how hard that's been, right? That's easy to wear us down. So put your focus forward on anything and everything you can. That doesn't mean fail to appreciate and understand what happened, but put your focus on where you're trying to get and what will get you there. And I think it's powerful.
I love your message about being a problem solver and not a risk taker. I'm gonna use that wording the next time I talk to my partner about some adventure I'm going on that she thinks is a little dangerous. I love that wording. And I totally agree with your message. You know, it's really remarkable achievement doing all 48 feet with your guide dog. As well as the peak we didn't see in the video, the Kilimanjaro. What would you say is your net peak? And you're welcome to take the question literal or metaphorically. What's your net peak?
Well, you know, exactly. That's what I love about the notion of peak potential. It is literal and it is figurative, right? Sometimes it's a mountain peak, but sometimes it's our moment of celebration and achievement in the world. And I'll give you a short term and a long term, because I always have multiple objectives in mind. But, you know, long term, I have been the CEO of this organization for 17 months. I left a previous organization where I was president, CEO, and founder because this was an opportunity to have a bigger impact. And not surprisingly, when a CEO changes, there's usually some challenge involved that led to that. So there's a lot of work to restructure this organization. And you know, the first step, because that's how journeys happen, right? Many small steps, was to hear everyone who is an employee here. I told them, ironically, with all the winter hiking, that my theme was ICE, improve the client experience. And my first client is my team, my staff, because if I make things better for them, we can move forward. And, you know, a year into this, I can tell you that the staff process has improved dramatically. We've measured that with pulse surveys, but what's next is we're changing our model of care because we're 112 years old, and not surprisingly, lots of things have changed, and we need to work in the environment now to see that we can serve the growing numbers of people. So this is a big project. This is a job of a lifetime. And so to not list that as my next peak, to make sure that we are serving more people in more effective ways at a top quality, I mean, that's a lot of goals. And that's really what my biggest peak is for the next many years of my life. But if I narrow it down a little shorter term, not quite so short as hopefully presenting well here today, but in a couple of weeks, I'm going to go take an elevator to the 30th story of the Brady Sullivan Tower in Manchester, New Hampshire, and then I'm going to go step off that perfectly good roof and rappel down the building. Now, this is the 5th time I do it. It's called United Over the Edge. And it's a lot of charities coming together and say, how do we all collaborate? We're not competitors, right? We fall into this trap because nonprofits can sometimes be competing for financial dollars with people, but we're not competitors, right? We're collaborators. There's a need that we all need to resolve, and the better we can draw attention and support each other, the better we'll work together. So I think rappelling down that building, my first time, I think it took me 20 minutes. My second time, I think it took me 13. I did it in 6 last year. So, right, just grow and learn. Practice makes progress.
Wow, that's just incredible. I don't know if I have the fortitude for something like that. As a follow-up question, I know as someone who is blind, I've ridden some pretty big horses, and people at me like, oh, like that's scary being on, so high up off the ground. And I know for me, I was like, yeah, well, it doesn't really matter, small horse or big horse. I don't, it's hard to tell how far the ground is. Do you find that when you're rappelling, obviously there may be other factors, but do you find it easier as someone who's blind or more challenging?
Yeah, I find it more challenging, and people are often surprised by that. But I think the most powerful thing we all have is our brain, our imagination. And, when somebody tells me, oh my goodness, it is 30 stories, I probably picture it as 80 stories in my head, right? It's a large distance. And, I'll relate that just when I was hiking, we were going up Mount Washington up a trail called Ammonoosuc Ravine Trail. And 2 of my friends came over and warned me. They said, hey, we're going to have a crossing. There's a little stream and it's about a 30-foot drop. And, 30-foot drop is something I don't want to follow. There'd be a lot of risk there. And I remember as we were crossing that area, I was going so slow and cautious, just had to, right? Problem solver, not risk taker. And when I got to the other side, my wife said to me, why did it take you so long? And I'm like, well, caution because of the 30-foot drop. And she said, what 30-foot drop? They were talking about a different area. I was just walking across a nice, flat, easy thing. But so you burn energy with nervous energy, right? And so the quicker you can change that anxiety, the better off it is. And to that end, I like to share that there's 2 words that are close: anxiety and anticipation. What they both mean is it's how you currently feel about a future uncertain event, right? One, anxiety, you're worried about the outcome. You probably feel a little out of control. And as a result, you're burning energy and stressing your body. The other, anticipation, you're excited about the possible outcome. You do feel like you can influence it. And as a result, you're filling your body with positive, energizing aspects. Well, how do you convert those two? It's a little bit of matter of perspective, right? Just like the perspective on a hike.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's really interesting. Yeah, that kind of unknowing uncertainty can definitely present a huge challenge. And try and use the best information you can to move forward. I'm glad your wife gave you a hard time. She sounds wonderful. I've met Tracy before and she is wonderful. So I'm just getting around. As you think about your many accomplishments, how has goal setting contributed to your success?
Yeah, it's pretty fundamental because it's developed more and more skills. And I think there's a different, I gave 3 reasons why I think goal setting is important, right? You get more things that you want when you're trying to set a goal. 2, you develop the skills. With that, practice makes progress. 3, you get confidence. But there's a 3.5. You get rewards that you never expect, that you don't get if you're not out there engaging and trying to solve problems. In 1996, which is a long time ago for some folks, I was working on programming a website using JAWS as a screen reader. And my goal was just to build a website and see if I could learn how to do the skill. But what happened from that ultimately is I got named Patriots Fan of the Year. I got put in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I got 2 free trips to the Super Bowl and an invitation to the White House to meet the president. That all happened separate from what was really happening in my goal, but as a result of that. And so that's why I think, right, you set goals, you know the reward you're going to get when you set a goal. What you don't know are some of the unexpected rewards that come along with it. It's yet another reason to do it, right? And you become known as somebody who can solve problems, and people seek you out. That's why I have this job today, not because I'm blind. In fact, they've never had a blind CEO. I have this job because I developed the skills. I demonstrated and proved on a regular basis that I had those skills, all by setting those goals, that they invited me to take this position. And I feel confident that in their reasons and in my ability to do it.
Wow, that's remarkable. And that really goes back to your thing of confidence in role modeling your skills and your competencies. That's really critical.
I'm sorry, can I add something to that, Brian? Because I think, when I say I'm confident, I think it's important for us to realize I'm not always confident. I doubt myself. I have moments where I struggle, and I think it's important for us to all realize most of us do. And the trick is, and I think this is super important, when you have that voice in your head telling you you can't, you shouldn't, you're not good enough, and most of us have that at some point in time, the most powerful lesson I ever learned is you are not the one saying that. You're the one listening to it. And you don't have to be a passive listener. Like I say, action, right, is so important. Take the active role inside your own head to say, no, I can do this. I've proven it by how many things I've done, how much I've learned. Don't let that negativity stay in your head. Take action and move it out, right?
Yeah, and I think that it's especially challenging for the population we work with, the blind and visually impaired. People have so many low expectation, negative attitudes. They just, are ignorant of the capability of people who are blind and visually impaired. And it's hard to block that out sometimes. You start comparing yourself to others, and so really knowing your worth and yourself is critical in the workplace and elsewhere, if you really want to be someone who's successful, despite being blind or visually impaired. Speaking of challenges, how do you tackle accessibility challenges in the workplace or even when climbing a mountain?
Right. So I like the accessibility, right? We're all going to encounter those challenges. And I usually have 2 quick goals on that. What's the immediacy? How do I resolve the immediate problem, right? If my problem is I need access to a picture to understand what's in a chart and it wasn't accessible in some format, I may need that answer quick to figure it out. So I may have a short-term method, like maybe I'll use Be My Eyes or sometimes technology, sometimes another solution to work around it. But you bet I want to address the long-term phenomenon of why does this accessibility issue exist? And how do we get that done? Voting in New Hampshire is accessible in the federal elections, for the most part, not accessible in the municipal election. Well, every year I want to make my vote count. So when those opportunities are there, I want to find the solution, even if it's not my ideal. But I'm going to advocate for the process to fix that long term. Right. And there's obviously lots of ways to do that. The first is I never start with an ADA sledgehammer, right? Because I think when you come in, if you're attacking anybody, and attacking can be a soft attack, but if you make them defensive, you make your job of educating harder. And I think education and the appropriately asked questions usually lead to people trying to do the solving for you, right? Solving the problems they should be solving.
I couldn't agree more. I know in my experience, I studied abroad, and there's no ADA abroad, so I had to get really good about communication with my professors around what kind of accommodations I need and why, so that they were more willing to buy in and use the tools that I needed to be successful. Totally agree, and I think that transferred well over here. I try and do the same thing work with people, talk to multiple people, collaborate, explain, rationalize why a problem exists and how we can move forward. And people are more responsive if you're willing to engage in that dialogue rather than coming in and saying, hey, ADA. I couldn't agree more with you. You're
That
hiking.
doesn't mean I haven't had to use the sledgehammer a few times, right? When somebody's deliberately belligerent, then it's time for educating them on, hey, here's what the law says, and if we have to use it, we can.
Yeah, definitely for sure. Your hiking adventures have included guide dogs in the videos we saw. Gwen and Autumn, two of your previous guide dogs. What should someone who has a colleague who uses a guide dog know about guide dogs in the workplace?
Oh, no, that's good. Right. First off, I like the notion that there's an icebreaker. I mean, a guide dog is a choice for everyone. There's reasons for and reasons against for each person. You have to kind of evaluate that. What are the benefits? What are the detriments? You know, when you get up at 6 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning on a February at 0 degrees and have to take your guide dog out, that's not everybody's cup of tea. But I think that if the benefit is there for you, icebreaker is one of it, then that's great. But in order for your dog to be a successful teammate, there are consistent guidelines they need. And helping people understand that, first thing I did was put out a note to my staff and say, hey, I'm open to communication about how interaction with my guide dog should look like, but let me give you some guidelines that will help first. And, I want the dialogue because that's education, but I want some judgment about when it's appropriate for that dialogue. I'm crossing a busy intersection. That's maybe not the time to engage me in conversation. If we're in a meeting, that's probably not the time to engage in that conversation. But the standard rule is interact with me, not my guide dog, right? And if you want different than that, then it starts with me, right? Ask me to understand what your options are in any situation, right? Some people do choose to have a way to let their dog off duty at a time and place. Some people don't, but it always needs to start with me. And if my dog has a sign, it's not something I do, but I know people who do it, that says, please do not pet, feed, etc. me, then that probably gives you your answer. You probably don't need to ask. But, to me, there are three aspects. Do not interact with my guide dog. And what that means is do not call their name, because like any of us, you hear your name, you're likely to turn your head. The problem is so bad that I know many people who use a different name for their guide dog so people won't know its real name, to call it, right? And, I can't tell you how many times I walk by somebody, I hear, and I don't think they're making kissy faces at me. Maybe. I think they're trying to get my dog, though. So 1, don't call them. 2, don't pet them. And it happens all the time. And when it happens, my first reaction isn't, okay, they're being malicious. Their intent is really good. What they're probably thinking in their head is, this is such a good dog. It does such good work. It deserves a reward. And they're right. The problem is, where they're wrong is how that reward is given. We, the handler, need to give those rewards. And when they do it, they think it's not going to do any harm. But the truth is it will. If they pet my dog might think, oh, maybe I'm supposed to follow this person. And I have to work to convince it not to do that, right? That's especially true at intersections while we're waiting for a light and somebody reaches down and I feel the harness shaking. I know they're rubbing its head back and forth. And I'll say, excuse me, please don't pet my dog. And they're like, I'm not. Right? We know better. So I give you 2, right? Don't call them, don't touch them. And 3rd is, right, please don't feed them, because how well we keep our dog's health has a lot to do with how long they can work. And we're going to give them all the right food. And even if they're trained, as you expect, to not accept food, it's still going to distract them. And the moment that they're smelling is probably the moment that I could miss and trip into a pothole or hit a tree branch because they were distracted, right? A dog is a little bit like a car. And if you're interacting with my dog, you're grabbing the steering wheel of a car while someone's driving.
I absolutely love that metaphor. And I've experienced people feeding my guide dog without permission, and it's always really frustrating. It's really challenging. So I'm glad you are making that message loud and clear and sharing that with people. We are almost out of time. I did want to check in with Alicia to see if maybe we have a question. If not, we'll wrap it up.
Well, we do have a comment from the Q&A, which is a nice way to maybe summarize and wrap things up. So one of our attendees says that they have loved the conversation about trying new things and about failures leading to growth. She says, my friend's family used to go around the table at night with a question of, what did you fail at today? I was so confused about that at the time when I had dinner with them, but it led to great discussions about normalizing and not being afraid or ashamed of failing.
I love that.
I love that. I'm a big believer that shame is something we don't need in our world. We shouldn't feel shame. We shouldn't share shame, right? There's something healthy in vulnerability, right? There's an author, Dr. Brene Brown, who I love. She has a book called Gifts of Imperfection, many other books actually. But the first way to connect is often to make yourself connectable, and vulnerability. And I don't mean you arbitrarily share things you're vulnerable about, appropriate vulnerability. There's some judgment there. But when you're willing to share your failings, people are going to understand you're human, and they're going to be able to relate to you better.
Absolutely.
I think that's a great note to end on. Thank you so much, Randy. Don't forget to check him out. I know he pushes some great stuff on Facebook and other social media site, as well as check out Future Insight. Don't forget to check out Career Launch at Perkins.org. We are currently pushing out a survey, an interest survey around our tech bootcamp and offerings. If you have the availability, check out that survey, especially if you're a member of the blind and visually impaired community and someone who's interested in learning, boning up on their AT skill. With that, thank you so much, Alicia and Randy, and thank you everyone else for joining us today. It was a great conversation.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Alicia. Thanks, everyone.